On July 22nd, 2025, the rock world trembled with grief. Ozzy Osbourne, the Prince of Darkness, took his final breath after an acute heart attack. Millions of fans mourned. Tributes poured in, and the stage lights seemed dimmer everywhere. But for Slash, the legendary guitarist of Guns N' Roses, the earthquake struck even harder, because 2 days later, at the door of his Los Angeles home, an envelope was delivered directly into his hands. The handwriting on the envelope was shaky, yet unmistakable. Slash recognized it instantly. That tilted scrawl had followed him through countless set lists and scribbled notes in recording studios. In the upper corner, a line was written that made his chest tighten. "Open after my death." Slash froze. His hands trembled as he slid a knife across the seal. The paper crackled softly, and then the first lines appeared, written by Ozzy himself. His hand weakened by Parkinson's, the letters wavered, pausing here and there where the cramps forced him to stop. Yet they carried an unshakable determination. From the very beginning, Ozzy addressed him with the nickname only he ever used, Guitar God. The words cut deep, both like a knife and like an embrace. Slash collapsed into a chair. His calloused fingers that had commanded guitars on the greatest stages in the world, suddenly felt powerless. In that silent room, surrounded by gold records and music memorabilia, Slash pressed the letter to his chest. Outside, the world was saying farewell to a legend. But here, he was just a man who had lost his closest friend. He didn't rush to read further. His tears fell, blurring the ink. For the first time in years, the stoic guitarist broke down and wept like a child. Slash knew what he was about to read wasn't just a farewell note. It was a legacy, a final confession. A piece of the Prince of Darkness's soul left behind just for him. For more than 3 decades, the names Ozzy Osbourne and Slash were often spoken as legends standing on opposite ends of the rock spectrum. One was the voice that tore through darkness, the other a guitar that burned with untamed fire. To fans, they were 2 separate icons, each belonging to their own musical universe. But behind the spotlight lay a quieter truth, a friendship few ever fully understood. It began not in glamour, but in a modest recording studio in Los Angeles in the early 1990s. Slash was at the peak of his fame with Guns N' Roses, while Ozzy stood at a crossroads, battling personal turmoil and doubts about his future. What started as a casual collaboration would become the invisible thread binding 2 souls. Slash thought he was simply doing a favor for a legend. Yet Ozzy saw something more in Slash's rough, spontaneous riffs. He rediscovered something he believed he had lost: the pure joy of making music. As Slash bent over his guitar, chasing melodies, Ozzy sat quietly in the corner, eyes glowing like a child watching magic unfold. Few knew that in that moment, Ozzy stepped back from the edge of quitting music altogether. From then on, their relationship deepened, strange, yet profound. Slash continued to call Ozzy the master, but secretly, Ozzy drew inspiration from Slash. Backstage, they shared hushed conversations, not about fame or money, but about fear, about sleepless nights, about keeping the flame of music alive in a world eager to consume and extinguish it. There were small moments Slash never forgot, like the time Ozzy sat in rehearsal, watching every movement of his fingers, when Slash teased, "Planning to learn guitar?" Old man Ozzy gave a dry laugh and answered, "No, I just want to understand the magic that drives you. Maybe I can sing the way you play." In that fragile confession lay the heart of their bond, The man who terrified audiences with his haunting voice carried secret insecurities, his lifelong inability to play instruments, his fear of being just a voice. And in that admission, Slash saw Ozzy not as a monster of rock, but as a human being. They spent nights together in silence, sharing cigarettes and scars. No roaring crowd, no stage lights, just two men weathered by battles with drugs, alcohol, and shadows. Their quiet company was a bond stronger than any contract. To the world, Ozzy and Slash were titans of rock to each other. They were fragile men leaning on one another not to fall. That is why the final letter, now trembling in Slash's hands, was not just a farewell. It was 30 years of friendship distilled into ink, mutual lessons, shared survival, and two souls that were never truly parallel, but intertwined. Slash unfolded the letter, every word striking straight into his chest. The very first line read, "Guitar God, if you're reading this, it means I'm already gone." The handwriting was shaky, broken at points, but each word carried the weight of all the strength Ozzy had left. Slash ran his fingers gently over the page, as if he could still feel the warmth of the friend who had just departed. In the letter, Ozzy spoke of the early 1990s, when they recorded Mama, I'm Coming Home. He confessed that at that time, he had seriously considered retiring. I felt drained. I was singing like a machine, no longer believing my voice mattered. But then, hearing Slash's first riffs lit a spark. Your sound reminded me that music was meant to be magic, and my voice, when paired with your guitar, finally felt alive again. By the time Slash reached that line, his tears blurred the ink. He had never known that a simple collaboration decades ago had saved a legend from giving up. To him, it had been just another session. To Ozzy, it was the rope that pulled him back from the abyss. The letter went on, filled with confessions Ozzy had never spoken aloud. He admitted he had spent years watching Slash perform not to learn guitar, but to find inspiration. When I see you play, I see myself when I was young, hungry, fearless, on fire. I wanted to bring that same energy into my singing, so the audience wouldn't just hear the music, they would feel it breathing in every note. Ozzy also spoke of the dark days, when he watched Slash fall into alcohol and drugs. I knew where you were, because I had been there too. And when I saw you come back, take control of yourself, I believed I could do the same. You gave me hope, even when you didn't know it. Those words tore Slash apart. For years, he had carried shame for his addictions, believing them stains that could never be erased. Yet now, the man he admired most had called his recovery heroic. Near the end, Ozzy left what felt like a will. Slash, keep inspiring the next generation. Make them love music the way you once made me love it again. Never let that fire die. Because rock isn't just sound, it's a soul. Slash folded the letter, pressing it to his chest. His shoulders shook as tears streamed freely. To the world, he was the unbreakable icon of rock. But in that moment, he was just a broken man, weeping for friendship, for loss, and for the last words of a brother in arms. For days, Slash carried the letter everywhere, clutching it as if letting go would sever his last tie to Ozzy. He read it over and over until the paper crumpled, the ink blurred by his tears. To him, it wasn't just a keepsake, it was a fragment of his friend's soul. But amid his private grief, Slash realized this letter wasn't meant only for him. It was Ozzy's final message to the world, to those still playing, still singing, still searching for reasons not to give up. So, A small press gathering was held in Los Angeles. Slash appeared in his familiar leather jacket, a black hat pulled low to hide his weary eyes. He sat down, placing the trembling letter on the table before him. The crowded room fell silent as he spoke. "There are things I thought I would keep to myself," Slash began, his voice raspy, "but I believe Ozzy would want you to hear this, because he lived his whole life for music, and he wanted music to live on after him." He opened the letter, hands shaking. The shaky handwriting of Ozzy gleamed under the harsh lights. Slash began to read. Each word echoed not in the fiery roar of his guitar, but in a trembling voice weighed with friendship and loss. When he reached the part where Ozzy called him Guitar God, Slash paused, his head bowed, tears streaming down his face. The room was utterly silent. Cameras zoomed in, capturing a moment when the stoic legend, known for his unshakable image, broke down like a child. The audience didn't clap, didn't cheer. They simply sat still, letting the words pierce their hearts. And when Slash reached the last line, "Rock isn't just sound, it's a soul," his voice cracked. His shoulders caved. A reporter in the front row wiped away tears. A cameraman lowered his head. They all knew they were witnessing history, not of music, but of humanity. When the reading ended, Slash stood, folded the letter carefully, and pressed it to his chest. "I lost a friend. I lost a teacher, but I was also given a duty to keep this fire alive. And I will, for Ozzy." Applause filled the room, not loud or thunderous, but solemn, like a prayer. Everyone there understood what they had just heard was not merely Ozzy's last letter. It was a legacy, a final anthem for the world of rock. After the reading, no one left the room with their heart intact. News spread like wildfire, on front pages, on social media feeds. The image of Slash bowing his head, tears dripping onto Ozzy's shaky words, became a symbol of friendship and of music's power. People no longer spoke only of the Prince of Darkness's passing. They spoke of the legacy he left in that final letter. A legacy not of awards or sales records, but of human connection. Young artists across the globe began sharing the letter as a reminder. A small London band wrote, "If Slash could inspire Ozzy, then any of us can touch another heart with our music." An indie singer in New York posted, "Rock isn't just technique, it's soul. Ozzy reminded me why I started singing." Even those outside of music felt it. A retired soldier commented, "I thought music was just entertainment, but watching Slash cry over a letter, I realized music truly saves lives." The wave spread further. Studios, small stages, bars, schools everywhere. Tribute concerts appeared, not grand, glittering shows, but intimate gatherings where people sang Ozzy's songs to keep his flame alive. Slash, still lost in grief, felt the shift deeply. Appearing on a television program not to promote, but to testify, he said, "That letter made me realize music isn't just for performance. It's for holding each other up. It's for giving strength. That's why we keep playing. Keep singing even when everything feels like it's falling apart." His words echoed far beyond. Even younger generations who had never seen Ozzy in his prime began listening. Old tracks resurfaced. On streaming platforms, plays of Mama, I'm Coming Home, and Changes skyrocketed. Music once again bridged time, space, and even death for Slash. The greatest aftermath wasn't the headlines or applause. It was the responsibility Ozzy had passed to him to be the torchbearer for the next generation. In mentoring young musicians, Slash often told the story of the letter as proof that sometimes a riff, a lyric, or a single song is enough to save a soul lost in the dark. Ozzy's final letter, carried by Slash, was never locked away in a drawer. It became a message to the world of music, that music is truly a soul, and every artist carries the duty to keep that soul alive. Time passed, yet the echo of that final letter never faded. For Slash, it became a sacred treasure, kept safely in a locked box, but often he would take it out, unfold the fragile paper, and each time felt as though he was meeting his friend again. In later interviews, when asked about the most precious possession of his career, Slash never mentioned his iconic guitar or the grandest stages he had played. His answer was simple: a shaky letter, written by Ozzy's hand. Fans across the world came to see that letter as a will left not only for Slash, but for the entire world of rock. It reminded them that behind the sold-out tickets, behind the roar of tens of thousands, behind the chaos and rebellion of rock and roll, there were still human beings who loved, who cared, who gave each other hope. Ozzy's music continued to play, but now every song carried new meaning. When people listened to Mama, I'm Coming Home, they didn't just remember the haunting voice, they remembered the silent dialogue between two friends. When changes echoed, even young listeners who had never lived through Ozzy's golden era found themselves in tears, knowing the music had been born from pain, rebirth, and a soul unwilling to surrender. Slash himself was transformed. No longer just a legendary guitarist, he became a storyteller, a keeper of the flame. To young artists, he often said, "Never underestimate the power of a song. It can save someone's life." It saved Ozzy, and it saved me. The story of the final letter was written into books, documentaries, and countless tributes. But more importantly, it lived on in the hearts of music lovers, because everyone understood what mattered wasn't how a legend left the world, but what he left behind. And what Ozzy left wasn't only timeless records, or the image of the Prince of Darkness on stage. What he left was the simple truth that music can heal, can connect, can pass from one generation to the next, like an undying flame. The letter ended with one line etched into Slash's heart and into the memory of millions. Rock isn't just sound, it's a soul. And that soul, through a shaky letter and unstoppable tears, will forever echo behind the blazing lights of rock and roll, behind the screams and the fire of the stage. There are fragile, human moments. Ozzy Osbourne's final letter was more than a farewell to a friend. It was a legacy to the world, a reminder that music doesn't just live in our ears, it lives in our hearts. And when Slash wept, the world finally understood rock never dies, because rock is a soul.